Some of the most penetrating voices in our journey don't even dress themselves in words. They arrive like the dull weight of regret, the thin needle of confusion, the invisible siege of expectations, and sometimes the crushing emptiness when we long for the slightest whisper from the Most High. There are those who ask with restless hearts if God still speaks, but the answer is not in the echo of a new sound, but in the eternal certainty He has never been silent. It is not God's silence that reigns, but our own absence of quietude. Imagine, my friends, that we enter a room where a gentle drumming resonates on a table, but we enter hurriedly, with our arms occupied by weights we didn't ask to carry. Our steps are thunder, our sighs are gusts, and then we say, "I heard nothing." Not because there was no melody, but because we made our noise a wall that blocks the music. And so we stumble, we who believe. We walk among weights and urgencies, we generate noise and commotion, and we forget to listen. Not that the Lord has ceased to speak, but that we rarely quiet ourselves enough to listen. In these times, silence has become a stranger, quietude, almost heresy, and attention, a leaf carried by the wind. However, my dear ones, God's voice does not burst forth like thunder among the noises of the world. It asks for quietude, it requires silence. It cries out for attention. The Lord does not speak just to speak. His words are not thrown to the wind merely to fill the emptiness of our doubts. He speaks with eternal purpose, not merely to answer, but to direct the course of our existence. As for the Lord, his eyes range throughout the earth, says Scripture, in 2 Chronicles 16:9, to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. This verse reveals something astoundingly simple. God seeks hearts, not just ears. He manifests where he is welcomed. His words rest where there is surrender. He does not demand impeccability, he desires surrender. The Almighty does not wait for the strong, but for those who surrender. For in them, and only in them, he dwells with power. God's voice is not background noise, it is divine compass. It is the voice that sculpts the approaching decision. It is the voice that pours comfort over the agitated chest. It is the voice that unveils what the eyes could never reach alone. When the Lord speaks, mountains bow. When he speaks, the storm bends in obedience. When he speaks, our steps find direction. When he speaks, chaos falls silent. Hearing God is not an inheritance reserved for a spiritual caste. It is a gift offered to every surrendered heart. This voice, sweet, firm, unmistakable, is the inheritance of those who believe, not of unreachable saints, but of all who place their faith in the Son. God speaks in ways that never contradict his word. He speaks in ways that plant peace where there was once anxiety. He speaks in ways that draw you closer, not farther away. He speaks in ways that do not crush you, but strengthen you. But, and here is the point, one must learn to listen. One must stop the step. One must silence the inner clamor and make space for him to instruct. Sometimes God speaks through a verse that clings to your mind like the tide that insists on returning. Other times, he uses someone's voice, simple and human, to touch wounds that only he knows. There are moments when deep, relentless knowledge arises, refusing to disappear, or a conviction that burns and resists forgetting. His voice may not resonate like thunder, nor appear wrapped in flames, but when he speaks, your spirit recognizes it is him. Often we beg God to speak louder, and yet he is saying, "Come closer." We cry out with strident voices, wanting an answer, but he responds with a whisper, not because he is distant, but because he is absurdly close. His whisper is like that of a loving father beside the bed of a restless child. It demands silence. It demands presence. It demands trust. It demands surrender. God's voice doesn't always say what you want, but it always brings what you need most. When your soul longs to escape, his voice, with tenderness and firmness, responds, "Remain." When your instinct is to hide in the shadows, his voice calls you to the light. When the urge to give up invades you like a storm, his voice breathes new courage. When anger tempts you to seek revenge, his voice leads you to the path of forgiveness. His voice shapes, refines, aligns. It trains your character, straightens your road, purifies your thoughts, and reveals the very heart of God. But there must be a real giving up of the self. As long as your own personality is what you are bothering about, you are not going to him at all. The very first step is to try to forget about the self altogether. C.S. Lewis states clearly, "You don't need spotlights to hear this voice, nor titles, nor applause. There is no need for harps or heavenly songs. What is required is a heart prepared like fertile soil, ears attentive like sentinels in the night, a spirit hungry like a traveler in the desert, and above all, time to listen, and courage to obey." Today I invite you to walk a path, not of steps, but of truths, truths that awaken us to the reality of hearing the one who has never been silent. Truth number one, not only does it command, but it affirms. Not only does it send, but it anchors. When the Lord speaks, he doesn't just show direction. He recalls your identity. There are many who know God's name, but have forgotten their own. They live like shadows, responding to fear's call, echoing doubt, carrying shame, embracing pain. They traded truth for labels. They forgot they were called children. But when God speaks, when he speaks, the once forgotten truth rises within you like an awakened lion. You are not what they made you. You are not the echo of harsh words thrown to the wind. You are not defined by the stumble you survived, nor are you imprisoned by the dark season you faced. When the Lord's voice is heard with clarity, like a trumpet in the desert, your identity stands firm as rock. God's voice doesn't sow confusion, it silences it. It doesn't add weight to anxiety. It dispels it like mist before the sun. It doesn't echo the enemy's deceptions. It proclaims with authority the Creator's truth. And what voice would have more right to define who you are than that of the author of your existence? He knows the hidden value in your clay. He sees the gold beneath the dust. He knows your limits and still calls you. He speaks to the core of your being, where no other voice has ever reached. And my dear ones, when God confirms who you are, something bursts within you like a liberated spring. You abandon the desperate search for applause from broken audiences. You cease begging for approval from voices that never saw your destiny. You stop hiding in corners where you were called to illuminate. Then, you begin to walk with the posture of those who know who sent them. You begin to pray like one who has access to the throne. You begin to move with the boldness of those who have finally heard their true name. Not because you are flawless, but because his voice, with tenderness and authority, spoke truth to your heart. The truth about who you are doesn't spring from culture that changes like tides. It isn't born from comparison that corrodes. It doesn't rest on fleeting compliments. Truth comes solely from the voice of the one who formed you in the womb before there was time. Many wander through life, years on end, searching for themselves. But the true encounter begins when God's voice makes itself heard. This voice doesn't just bring information, it brings affirmation. It tells you you are chosen. It says you are empowered. It proclaims you are known. It whispers you are seen. But there are so many, oh so many, who walk the earth with the name that pain gave them, or with the name that fear engraved on their souls. However, God, the God who sees beyond the wound and fear, calls you by a new name, a name that carries purpose, a name that carries calling, a name that reflects what heaven says about you. When he speaks, your name is restored. Your value is clarified. Your doubts, once so noisy, begin to quiet. It's impossible to hear the Creator's voice and remain lost in your identity. Even if the path is still long, even if the scenery around you doesn't change instantly. Because his voice doesn't work only on the surface. It descends to the most intimate part of your being. And there, it performs the miracle of restoration. Let us then see what Isaiah 43:1 says. My friends, this verse, Isaiah 43:1, is not mere tapestry to adorn the wall of faith. It is not poetry to cradle the soul in vague comfort. It is a proclamation from heaven itself. In it, God declares with majesty, you were created. You were molded by his hands. You were redeemed by his love. You were called by name. And more than that, you are his. This is the truth that God's voice always reaffirms. It doesn't limit itself to instructing your tasks. It goes deeper. It reminds you of your essence. It speaks of your spiritual DNA, of the place reserved for you in eternity. You are not a mistake. You were not forgotten in the backstage of creation. You are not lost in the midst of an indistinct crowd. You are known. You are called. In the midst of the clamor of voices trying to assign you false names, only one voice echoes with creative authority. Only one speaks the truth about who you are, the voice of the one who formed you. And when you begin to hear this voice louder than the others, something rises within you. Confidence springs forth like a fountain. Clarity retakes the throne of the mind. Peace descends like a mantle over the spirit. Boldness, yes, holy boldness, begins to guide your steps. You will no longer doubt what God has already confirmed. You will no longer reject what he has already sealed. You will no longer tremble before what he promised to resolve, because when the Lord calls you by name, he is not just identifying you. He is claiming you. He is declaring with a voice of loving possession, you are mine. You are not the inheritance of your past, nor a prisoner of the scars you carry. You are not shaped by the cold voices of your critics. You are mine. This is the singular power of God's voice. It breaks the labels that the world anxiously tries to stick on you, and reconnects you to the name that God himself wrote over your existence before you even breathed for the first time. You don't need to excavate the world in search of value. You need rather to hear his voice. You don't need to run like one chasing fugitive identity. You need only to remain close to the shepherd, the one who knows your name like no one else. He knows your tears before they fall, your battles before they arise, your future before you reach it. The new step, the step from being creatures to being sons, is voluntary. When it is offered to us, we can refuse it. C.S. Lewis. And when you begin to walk in the truth spoken by his voice about who you are, the ground beneath your feet changes. You stop fighting to be noticed. You stop begging for understanding. You stop fearing abandonment. You begin to live like one who has already been chosen, like one who is already deeply known, like one who hears the Father's voice, and knowing it, responds with confidence. There is no longer a need to prove yourself. There is only the call to obey what has already been said. So, my friends, let his voice resolve this within you. Let this voice silence all the lies, because no human word has authority to contest what the Father has already proclaimed about his children. Let his voice call you out of the cave where you hid and lead you into the purpose that was already waiting for you. This is what happens when God's voice confirms who you are. It doesn't just reveal, it invites. It doesn't just console, but also commands. And let it not be thought that this voice is always gentle, like the morning dew. Sometimes it strikes like a beam of intense light, illuminating corners we preferred to keep in shadow. Because before healing flows like balm, the wound needs to be exposed. Before growth takes shape, the roots need to be turned over. This is the sacred work of God's voice, not to break, but to restore, not to wound, but to make whole. Correction. Far from denying love, is love itself in its most active and careful form. After all, only those who truly care dare to touch what others prefer to ignore. And the Lord, who sees all, loves too much to remain silent before what needs to be transformed. He speaks to the areas we mask with tired smiles. He reaches the forgotten rooms of the heart, locked by old traumas and persistent disappointments, where everyone around has already accommodated your harmful habits. God refuses to give up. Not even silence escapes his loving inspection, because where there is darkness, he brings light, and where there is hidden pain, he speaks to heal. The bitterness that lies beneath, the veneer of kindness, the fear that hides under the mantle of ambition, the pride that masquerades as confidence. None of this goes unnoticed by the penetrating sound of God's voice, because true transformation never comes without confrontation. And often, what we learn to skillfully manage is precisely what has been hindering our growth. The soul stagnates whenever we refuse the gentle but firm touch of the Spirit, especially when he speaks through the Word. God is not an echo of our feelings. He doesn't cradle us in our impressions. He summons us beyond them. His voice addresses the habits we cultivate in the dark. It interrogates our excuses, exposes the rigidity of our will, points to what we resist surrendering. And sometimes it's not the blatant sins that bar our advancement, but the small accepted habits, the thoughts we let slip through our fingers as if they were harmless, the silent anger we never face, the obedience that day after day wears away like stone under rain. Every step toward purpose requires an honest pause before the mirror of the soul. God, in his wisdom, doesn't waste time dragging you back to the ruins of the past. Instead, he summons you, not to mourn what was, but to answer for what will be. What you do next that indeed carries eternal weight. To human eyes, comfort can be confused with peace, but in the presence of the Most High, true peace often is born from discomfort. God's correction uproots what is foreign to his plan. It shakes your foundations not to destroy, but so that truth may be rebuilt on firm ground. Many cry out for clarity, but they forget that clarity requires cleansing. The path ahead cannot be walked with the debris of past compromises. That's why God's voice is not just a lamp for the feet. It's also purifying fire. It guides, yes, but it also reproves. It shows the future, but first it dismantles the disguises. And see how he speaks in Zephaniah 3:17. The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. What a glorious mystery! The same God who corrects with firmness also sings with tenderness over those he loves. The one who shakes also comforts. The one who wounds to heal also celebrates with songs. Although this verse sings the song of divine love, pay attention, my friends, to what precedes it, the presence of God himself. And where the Lord dwells, nothing impure remains untouched. His love is not inert, it is active. He calms with tenderness, yes, but he also shakes with zeal. The same voice that cradles your soul in comfort is the one that turns firm and clear against the sins you tried to hide. The God who sings over you also speaks with surgical precision to the areas that need to be aligned with his will. And here lies one of the great dangers of the spiritual walk: listening selectively, welcoming God's voice in moments of worship, but rejecting it when it touches our attitudes and decisions, generates a divided heart, and a divided heart cannot stand. Real growth doesn't happen with half-truths. To mature, one must embrace the entire counsel of the divine voice. Many long to hear God speak about purpose, direction, ministry. Few are willing to hear him speak about character. But the truth is that calling without character is building on sand, and the God who calls also shapes, and shapes deeply. It takes courage born of humility to make this prayer. Lord, what needs to change in me? A simple question on the surface, but one that opens the door to the refining fire. And know this, my friends, vessels that pass through refinement carry a deeper glory. When you allow God to speak to your weaknesses, there is no humiliation, but strengthening. When you let him touch the hidden battles, what was prison begins to crumble. And when you stop protecting what he desires to remove, the doors of the future open with freedom. Conviction, so often feared, is, in fact, proof that God is still active in your story. It is the light that infiltrates where there was once shadow. It is the alarm that awakens before the abyss. And above all, it is a sign that your heart is not hardened beyond reach. Genuine love doesn't hide behind comfortable silence. It speaks truth. That's why those who truly love us sometimes tell us what we don't want to hear. They perceive the direction of our road, and because they care, they speak. How much more would our God, who sees all, who knows every curve ahead, not speak to us out of love? Truth, when received with humility, has the power to transform even the most hardened corners of the heart. The Lord, in his demanding goodness, will never allow you to settle on shallow ground when he created you to fly at greater heights. Perhaps the reason you feel stagnant is not the absence of God's voice, but the presence of something you decided to ignore, something he has already told you. Delayed obedience creates a thick fog in the soul. It clouds the steps and destabilizes peace. When God points to what needs to be transformed, he is not stealing something precious from you. He is preparing ground for something greater. What he asks you to abandon was never meant to accompany you to the next station of the journey. Perhaps he is asking for forgiveness instead of resentment, realignment instead of routine, the closing of a door you insist on keeping open, the abandonment of content that sickens the spirit, or the purification of the intentions behind your actions. The Christian life is, of course, different, harder and easier. Christ says, "Give me all. I don't want so much of your time, and so much of your money, and so much of your work. I want you." C.S. Lewis. Whatever it is, know this. On the other side of obedience there is freedom, real freedom, not that which deceives, but that which restores, because what God asks, he asks with purpose. and what he promises he fulfills with glory. Spiritual maturity, my friends, is not measured by the vastness of knowledge, but by the promptness with which one responds to correction. The truly committed soul is not the one that knows much, but the one that bends quickly before God's voice. This disposition to adjust, to yield, to surrender, is what separates those who walk in depth from those who only touch the surface. If all you seek is light inspiration, prepare to be frustrated with the Lord's voice. But if what you desire is transformation, then you will find in it a force that empowers you. God's voice doesn't flatter, it purifies. He is not shaping people to charm the world, but to reflect his heart. And this reflection begins not with perfection, but with surrender. You are not outside the plan for needing correction. On the contrary, you are exactly at the right point to grow because God is still speaking to you. He hasn't turned his face away. He hasn't crossed out your name. He speaks because he still loves you. Allow, then, this voice to touch every area, not just the beautiful and presentable parts, but also those that hurt, that have been neglected or hidden. Let it rebuild your thoughts, confront what has long been asleep, and awaken action where there was once only inertia. Because this is what happens when God's voice confronts. It doesn't destroy. It transforms. My friends, every mission that is born in God's heart begins with something sacred and often silent, a word. It doesn't always come in a loud voice. It doesn't always echo before crowds, but it is always a word that calls you out of where you have been into the place where you were always meant to be. The same voice that confirms your identity, that confronts what needs to change, also commissions you to rise. It doesn't speak for pastime. His voice is not meaningless noise. Every syllable that comes from God's mouth carries purpose and direction. Divine instruction is never idle. When God speaks, he is not just saying something, he is pointing the way. Standing still may seem safer to the fearful heart, but it is obedience that releases destiny. You were not molded in the Creator's image to live in hesitation. You were not called to survive on the minimum. You were made to advance under the order of a heavenly commander. God's voice is your green light. It is the awakening of what time tried to put to sleep. It is the wind that dispels the fog and clears the path. After being affirmed and realigned comes the time to be activated. The Lord doesn't reveal truths just to expand your information. He reveals them so you may walk in them with boldness. Therefore, hearing is not enough. One must also obey. One must move. Many hear God's voice, clear, precise, undeniable, and still wait for another sign. They hesitate, not for lack of direction, but because the mission sounds too big for the resume of their experiences. But they don't understand that when he speaks, he provides. When he commands, he enables. When he sends, he himself goes ahead as shield, guide, and sustenance. You don't need a perfectly drawn plan when you already possess a word from heaven. Faith doesn't require complete maps. It feeds on step-by-step obedience, and a single step, even if trembling, can alter the course of an entire life. In the midst of doubt's noise and the slowness of our hesitations, God's voice remains like a faithful compass. It pulls you from stagnation. It strengthens those who already felt defeated. It rekindles dreams that time had buried. Divine commission, whenever it comes, takes you beyond the comfortable, beyond the predictable. Because if it was something you could accomplish alone, then, let's agree, you wouldn't need his voice. The simple fact that he is speaking even now, even here, is undeniable proof that something greater awaits you. something greater than the mistakes of your past, greater than the fears you fed in silence, greater even than all the excuses you used to postpone your surrender. Moving forward, my friends, was never about trusting in yourself. It's about trusting in the one who spoke. If he called you, he will also sustain you. He doesn't give the order and then withdraw. He remains, he guides, he provides. And now let us listen to Micah 6:8, as one who hears a summons. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. It is not a pious suggestion. It is a call, a commission, for a life of purpose, not to simply exist, but to live with intention. This voice doesn't leave you adrift. It says how to walk, with justice in acts, with mercy in affections, with humility in steps. This is how we move when we hear the one who speaks with truth and grace. God doesn't call you to remain eternally seated upon revelation, like one who contemplates a flame without ever warming himself. He calls you to live it. What you receive in prayer must manifest in action. Your calling is not a mere noble feeling. It is real movement toward obedience. When you delay your response, you also delay the fruits it would bring. When you doubt what God has already made clear, you plunge not into security, but into confusion. But, when you move the instant he speaks, you enter the rhythm of grace, the beat of favor. Many cry out for open doors, but ignore the instructions already given. They want signs, but disregard the directions. They plead for confirmations, when heaven has already commissioned them. You don't need another prophecy to begin. You need faith, not faith that waits passively, but faith that rises and acts on what God has already spoken. Faith without movement is theory, but faith in action transforms into living testimony, because what is confirmed in heaven must be walked on earth. The life of Christ demands the mortification of the self. It is painful to human nature, but the path of obedience is the only one on which we can walk with him. C.S. Lewis. When you respond to God's commission, you are not just accepting a task. You are entering a sacred covenant. You walk, but not alone. His hand goes with you. His favor surrounds you like a shield. His Spirit enables you beyond your natural strength. Obeying may not be comfortable, but it is always a path of reward, because obedience positions you for encounters that not even the most meticulous planning could orchestrate. It leads you to provisions that your expectation would never dare predict. It takes you to the place where miracle touches movement, where heaven meets earth in the midst of your walk. Many delay progress waiting for a feeling of readiness, but being ready was never a feeling. It's a response. You become ready by obeying. God doesn't commission those who are already capable. He enables those who respond to the call. He doesn't choose those who have everything in place. He chooses those who are willing. You don't need to see the complete picture. You just need to say yes. You don't need men's approval. It's enough to be in agreement with the one who sent you. Because when God calls, it is the yes of your heart that opens the heavens over your path. God's voice carries absolute authority. When he says go, even the elements of creation bend in obedience. When he says speak, power pours out like an impetuous river. When he says build, resources move from invisible to visible. The enemy's greatest strategy is simple but effective. Keep you paralyzed by fear. But God's voice, oh, this voice, breaks the cycle of stagnation with a single command. His word doesn't come empty. It comes loaded with divine power. And when you receive it, it wasn't made to rest, but to move, because there is someone waiting on the other side of your obedience. There is a breakthrough reserved on the path you have been avoiding. There is favor stored, ready to manifest the instant you take the first step. So stop asking yourself if you are good enough. That was never the right question. Start remembering who it was that sent you. Because God, the God who forms universes with speech, doesn't waste words. If he spoke, it matters. And if it matters to him, it should move you. Lift your head, shake off the dust of hesitation, and advance with firmness in the word that has already been delivered to you. This is not the time to retreat. It's not time to shrink. This is the time to rise. You have been affirmed in identity. You have been corrected with love. And now you have been commissioned with authority. Say yes. Take the step. Walk with boldness in the direction of what God, from the beginning, has already prepared for you. Because when God speaks, he doesn't just inform. He transforms, he calls, he sends, and he sends with power, with purpose, with presence. Let his voice be the fire that ignites your purpose, the truth that anchors your identity, and the command that propels your feet toward what is already prepared in the Father's heart. Because what he has spoken, he will fulfill. Now, brothers and sisters, let us unite in prayer to our gracious and loving God. He is here, hearing every word and knowing every need. Close your eyes, open your heart, and pray with me in faith. Let us pray. O Most High, eternal voice that breaks chaos, sound of heaven that shaped the worlds, holy whisper that anchors the weary heart. You spoke, and light was born. You commanded, and the heavens bowed in obedience. And now, with fear and gratitude, I prostrate myself before you, not because I am worthy to hear, but because you are gracious in speaking. You call me by name, not with condemnation, but with compassion, not to expose, but to restore, not to crush me, but to lift me up in your truth. Forgive me, Lord, for the times I closed my ears, when I preferred the noise of my desires to the soothing sound of your wisdom. Purify me from all subtle resistance, from all distraction that dulls my soul. O God, break the idols that silence your voice. Pride masqueraded as independence, haste that suffocates meditation, fear that refuses obedience. Give me a heart like Samuel's, ready to respond, even without understanding. Give me ears like Mary's, that sit at your feet until the world disappears. Give me the knees of Paul, bent before your glory, willing to go, suffer, and proclaim. Lord, I don't ask that you speak louder, but that I become quieter. I don't ask for more signs, but courage to obey those I have already received. Inflame my soul with your word, like fire in the bones, like a hammer that shatters rock. Protect my mind from the enemy's confusion. Free me from spiritual deafness that transforms conviction into theory and calling into procrastination. Surround my house with your warrior angels. Guard my loved ones from every hidden snare. Open the way for your presence where there is darkness. Make peace flourish where fear dwells, and anoint our lives with the boldness of redeemed children. O sovereign Lord, speak, and I will hear. Guide, and I will follow. Correct, and I will bow. Send, and I will depart. For yours is the kingdom where I was adopted, the power that sustains me, and the glory for which I was created. In the name of Jesus Christ, the Word that became flesh, the voice that conquered the tomb, and the shepherd who still calls his sheep by name. Amen. If this message spoke deeply to your heart, share in the comments. I trust in you, Lord. We want to walk with you on this journey of faith. Believe that God heard every word, wiped away every tear, and is already moving heaven in your favor. Great things are to come. Share this moment of hope and faith with other people. Like, subscribe to the channel, and send this video to friends and family. Thus, together, we will be answering Jesus' call in Mark 16:15. Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Thank you for being with us until here. It is a joy to be able to walk alongside you on this spiritual journey. May the Lord continue blessing you and your family with peace, love, and strength for the days to come. We'll meet in the next video. May God be with you always.